Hi, and welcome to episode 6 of the Armchair League. I'm your host, Novasight.
I'm Aspari-One.
So, it's been a little while. Had to kind of wait a week because we've been busy, but that's okay. We have some pretty broad topics this week for each focus. And for this week, mechanics is advanced movement, like kiting and Orbwalking, and our behavior section is more stuff about repetition, aka negative repetition, because last time we talked about repetition, I didn't actually cover the negative factors of it. And we're also covering tilting on behavior. And tilting is a big one. I think most people know tilting. And for community, it's makings of LCS teams, aka the pay your coach segment. As someone who wants to coach people in League, I have some thoughts on having coaches and dealing with them. And for the game itself, our view on Season 4, now that it's ended, since we're moving on to Season 5 now. It's pretty much upon us. All the big changes have been coming through. And our meta topic is looking ahead of the curve. So that would be things like what to expect in the future in the meta, since it's always changing, and how to stay ahead of everyone else. So our first topic is advanced movement. What is advanced movement, Sven?
Advanced movement? Well, it's a general term would be self-explanatory. Advanced movement is just moving advancedly. But humor aside, advanced movement in this case would be covering orb walking and kiting.
Yep.
So those two aspects, in a general sense, I'll explain kiting and orb walking. So kiting is basically avoiding the area of attack of your enemy. So if it's, say, like a champion like Xin is coming up on you and you're Ashe or somebody, for example, or like Ezreal. Ezreal's a very big kite champion. So if Zin's only able to actually attack you when he's up on you, he's right up in your face. So as a ranged champion, you're able to pop away from his gap closer as Ezreal. He'll probably pop you into the air, but then you just shift your way away from him, and then you can continue attacking him. So that's basically exploiting his area of attack. He can't get his auto attacks off on you because he has no range to be able to do it. So kiting just basically exploits. In one aspect, it exploits the range deficit of certain champions, and in other aspects, it's basically moving and shooting away from somebody. So, for example, your bot lane, you're doing a 1v1 against both ADCs, and you're an ADC. The other ADC is what have you. This can apply to any champion. And he decides to attack you, but you're unsure of how much damage and power they do, so they continue attacking. And instead of just plain walking back to your tower, you move back, auto-attack him once, move back, auto-attack him once, move back, auto-attack him once. So it's continuously moving back and forth with your mouse to attack him as you're making your way to your tower. Sometimes that's a bit of a detriment to you, depending on how much power there is that they have on their side. Or it could be very advantageous to you if they're half health or below half health, and you manage to bring them to your tower. So they can't easily dive you or get away with a kill. So if you do that, you actually may get something out of it. But kiting, in a sense, is basically, as I said, moving and shooting.
Yeah, so kiting exploits two things. As Sven said, one of them is the range deficit. The other thing is champion speed. Because depending on how fast your champion is in comparison to theirs, it makes it easier or harder for you to basically not get hit by them. So, for example, if you're playing a ranged champion top lane versus, let's say, a Nasus, He's pretty easy to kite for the most part. You can, if he comes at you, you can pretty much just move and shoot at him as he comes at you, and until he has Wither at a leveled well enough, he won't be doing that much to you. But he does have something to make up for, which is his Wither. It's the same for other champions too that have decent gap closers. They can kind of fix their problem of getting kited. Like Udyr, you can kite Udyr for the most part, but gets fast enough with bear stance, then it's impossible. And that being said, if they're good at their role, they can do the opposite thing to you, which is Orbwalking. So they'll be moving with you as you move, and they'll keep hitting you even though they're melee, because they'll be using their speed to their advantage. That's something to take into consideration. So the big thing is, lots of people seem to have this issue where they like to stand still with their ranged champions, which is just not right. It's not going to really accomplish much of anything. What sense would it make to be playing Caitlyn, for example, and just standing there while Tryndamere smacking you in the face with his giant ass sword, murdering you? Not much. That's why...
Or even standing there, for example, and not really doing anything other than just standing there and shooting.
Yeah, that applies to pretty much anything, too. I mean, you can even kite other ranged champions if you have more range than them, or faster. People like to let people get into their face too much, which is how they end up getting killed so easily. You gotta understand your range, and you gotta understand your speed in comparison to your enemy, and then you should be able to do okay against them. Oh, what else is there to say about it? Kiting.
I think that's pretty much all. Yeah, that pretty much covers kiting.
Alright.
It's basically just the exploitation of the area of attack of a champion, or the move speed detriment that they have in comparison to you.
Yeah.
And Ashe is a very, very good kitey champion, for example, because Ashe has that built-in slow. With somebody like Gnosis, if she's running away, she can keep that range up. Now, Ashe is kind of rough in that aspect at the same time, too, because she has a very kitey kit, but like the move speed aspect, she's also able to be kited depending on who, or actually orb-walked depending on who she's going against.
Yeah, she's not very fast, and she doesn't really have any gap closers or escapes herself. You can still use it against her.
In a general sense, kiting is just exploiting what you can off of the enemy in a movement sense.
Yeah, and Orbwalking is pretty much the same, but the other way around. It's keeping ahead of them, continually hitting them so you can kill them, and it's a really good thing to know when you have an advantage on someone damage-wise, and you can keep up with them. If you're always walking in front of them and you're always like faster than them, you just pretty much walk alongside of them and kill them.
Which is a good thing to use with somebody like Yi, for example, because Yi has that move speed steroid, as well as a damage aspect and a gap closer. So what you do with orb walking, a technique for orb walking, is basically you click on them, you click ahead of them, or off to, well, actually not ahead of them. That's a bad thing that a lot of people get in the habit of doing. But you click on them, then you click off to the side of them, and then you click on them again, click off to the side. So you continue that attack, but at the same time, you're also kind of canceling your own animation, so you can keep your movement. So instead of going through the animation and just standing there, then moving, you cancel your own animation, which allows you to move forward.
If you don't understand exactly what we mean, just watch some professional players stream, and they pretty much show it all the time in their play. They know how to kite and orb walk, well, with the exception of a few pro players I've seen.
Yeah.
They seem to have the same problem as some people and just stand there and attack. But you look at players like Double Lift or even like Bjergsen on Melee Champs, he knows how to orb walk people. And they know kiting, they understand these little mechanics of the game that put them ahead of people. So it's a good way to understand and learn. But in order to actually fully get it, just try and do it yourself. Try always to be moving your character while you're attacking. The other good thing about doing that, if you're moving alongside of them or walking them, you have a better chance of dodging skill shots too.
Yeah, which is part of the other aspect of orb walking, which is a habit that actually you want to get into when it comes to orb walking. And this habit is, instead of, as I said earlier, clicking directly in front of them, you want to click to the off to the side of them, so you're always at a diagonal. Instead of being right behind them, it's easy to fire skill shots at you. So, say you're trying to orb walk against somebody like Ezreal, he's skill shot heavy. If you're right behind him the whole time, just auto attack, auto attack, auto attack, auto attack, all he has to do is just aim backwards and then fire his full force at you, and then there's a lot of damage on you. If you're off to the back right or the back left of him and orb walking that way, where you're continuously clicking on a diagonal, you'll not only keep up with him and apply the damage, but you have a good chance of dodging those skill shots, because a lot of ADCs, they tend to kind of crap out under pressure when it comes to being damaged consistently like that.
I have another term for what you're talking about. It's called walking the singed.
Yeah, that too.
Because anyone who's played against Singed understands that when he has his Q active, his poison trail is going behind him all the time. But if you're off to the left or right of him while behind, you will be less likely to get hit by it while you're attacking him, so you can avoid all that unnecessary damage on yourself. That's why I call it walking the Singed.
Actually, playing against Singed would be a good mode of practice, especially with orb walking, because you see that line of trail and you don't want to be in that trail.
Yeah.
Just think of every single champion that you're going against having a poison trail. Avoid the trail.
Yep, that's pretty much the best explanation we have for those mechanics. The one thing is, it's hard to put some mechanics in words. Like, you can explain it, but you have to see it or experience it yourself to truly get it.
We can only give you a general idea of how it works and what it does, but in order to fully understand it, you definitely have to see it, and you have to practice it, and you have to try and work with it yourself. Some of you may get an idea just by us simply talking about it. There's some of them out there that are just do that. It's just how they learn and how they operate. Other ones, they need the hands-on. So that makes sense on that aspect. So all you have to do is just, look up some videos or look up some pros. There's a couple orb walking teaching videos out there too, I believe. Pretty sure I remember seeing a couple a while back.
Yeah.
But practice.
That's okay. I'll make a video about orb walking on my channel when I do my League of Basics videos.
Oh yeah.
I still have to work my way into that. I haven't even got past the client screen yet.
All in due time.
Okay, our next topic is behavior, which is more stuff about repetition, but it's negative repetition. So, as a refresher, last time we talked about repetition was about learning the game by repeating the same actions. The thing about that, as we talked about last time, it's good to learn things by just doing the action over and over, whether it be practicing CSing or practicing orb walking. Just repeat those actions and figure out how they work, and then they become second nature to do so. Now, the problem with repetition is negative repetition, which is repeating the same incorrect actions over and over. Because anytime someone picks up these actions and they do it so repeatedly, it becomes second nature to them. It can actually be detrimental for people, because you could be repeating a negative action. Let's say overextending in lane. People would consistently do that, and that becomes a problem.
Yeah, so repetition in general is, I believe I said this last time actually, I'm not sure, but repetition in general is just, as it is, a double-edged sword. So it works in two ways. It's either good or it's either bad, depending on your awareness of what you're doing. Any bad behaviors, you have to understand that you're still doing those behaviors in order to fix them. And a lot of people don't notice it or don't pay attention to it, what have you, and they continue doing those behaviors, which is bad for them, bad for the team. They're not going to progress. So in general, it's good to keep an eye on everything.
That's one thing. If you want to consistently progress in the game, you gotta really understand what you're doing, whether it be good or bad, and you just gotta eliminate the bad parts. And of course, it takes time and practice, but I mean, it's all part of the process of learning the game. And like, even when I'm teaching people things, or I'm teaching people not to do certain things, I always keep close attention on stuff they consistently do, and see if they start eliminating any negative things that they do. And it just doesn't always come up that way, but when I'm coaching people, I tend to let them know that, like, look, you've been doing the same action over and over, and it hasn't been working out for you. Why didn't you try this instead? And some people understand, and learn from it, and some people are kind of stuck in their way. But then they can't really complain though if they don't progress. And yeah, that's really much all I can say about negative repetition. Anything else to add?
Not really. In general, anything you have, like, as I've said before, anything you have that's kind of a bad behavior, repeating that same bad behavior will only add to other bad behaviors too.
Yeah.
Like, for example, as we were talking about earlier, the orb walking directly behind somebody. If you end up having that behavior and that's fine-tuned and inground into your understanding of how to orb walk, then you're less likely to kind of break out of that. So if you're still learning a new ability, you want to try and learn to do it right first off. Then you'll be on the fast track to actually being able to do anything with it, which prevents you in the end from doing the second portion of this behavior thing, which would be tilting.
Yeah, so tilting's the big topic this week for behavior. So everybody tilts, but what tilting is different for every single person. Basically, it's when you get a negative feeling in the game due to something that has occurred previously or is occurring at the time. So let's say you're a top laner and you're getting camped and ganked over and over by the jungler. And then you start getting mad and yelling at your jungler, or you're blaming your mid laner for not roaming up, or you just you become so frustrated you lose sight of what you're doing. That is what tilting is. Now, everybody does it in one way or another. It's pretty much impossible to completely prevent, but you gotta understand that at the end of it all, League of Legends is still a game. There's no point in getting mad at people, and I always say this to people: you can't control what your teammates do. You can only control what yourself does. You can only control your own character. You can't control them. It's not an RTS, unfortunately. So you're not the big commander. Unless you're doing like ranked 5s as a team or something, then you might have some leadership role. But then that's a completely different beast altogether. But yeah, tilting is kind of has a domino effect too. It's kind of what's the best way to put it? Oh, okay. So I'll use the top lane blaming jungler as an example again. So let's say you blame your jungler for not ganking for you, and you're calling him like a cancer noob or some garbage like that, and harassing him. Now, that's not going to help anybody because he's probably going to be going on tilt, and then this jungler will be, instead of ganking anybody, it'll be going into the jungle and just CSing forever instead of trying to help the team at all. He won't participate in team fights, and then we'll say the mid laner's getting mad at the AD carrying support because their lane's getting dominated. But the thing is, you personally always have some preventative measure for these things happening to you. So instead of blaming the jungler for getting ganked up top, you could always think of a solution like, oh, I'll ward and I'll CS under turret and I'll try and keep it safe. I might get tower dove, but I might be able to suggest that my team can get a dragon out of it, and I might even get a kill from getting dove. And if you're the mid-laner, that goes to show how much I like mid-lane players. Anyways, if you're a mid-lane player and you're blaming your bot lane for who knows what, just getting shit on in lane, then you gotta understand that as a mid laner, you could always roam, you could always apply more pressure on your opponent and draw the attention to you, and then you could deal with the consequences. So you just gotta think next time before you start typing words at people. You gotta realize that there's always a better solution. You can always do better. And that's one of the things I like to say to people. Do better. What do you have to say about tilting?
As you said earlier, tilting can mean anything for anyone. Sometimes you can tell when you're on tilt, other times just something happens where you're not really realizing it till it's too late. But tilting only detriments you and your team. And if you understand that you're tilting and you understand what's going on, then you can easily say, you know what, I'm just going to take a break. Maybe I'll play again in about an hour or two. I'll play some video games, some other video games. Then you come back to it, and then you're kind of fresh. Or something happens, like, hell, we're all humans. Things happen in our lives. Like, it's unavoidable. Something happens before, so you're just like, oh, this day was crap. So you're feeling kind of down about it. It wouldn't be a good idea to start playing other rounds of League if you notice your playability is screwed. But tilt affects everybody in different ways. Sometimes you could be... This is why I kind of look at it. Sometimes you can be happy as hell and still be on tilt. Basically, tilt is the result of something that's abnormal behaviorally in a player. So, for example, like Sky, for example, when he gets angry, he gets better. He doesn't go on tilt. He gets actually better at his jungle position. He starts playing better. He starts playing more consistent, which is strange. I know, it's kind of weird. But his play improves, so tilt doesn't affect him that way, whereas somebody, they could be extremely happy or something, or excited about something. They're not focusing on the game itself because something else is about to happen, like Christmas the next day or something. They're all excited about the gifts they're about to get. So suddenly they're not focusing on the game so much that they're screwing themselves over as well as the enemy team, so that in that way can be considered tilt as well. So there's different aspects of what you can look at what would be considered tilt. It's not always just angry. It's just, in general, the disability to play at the moment. And it kind of sounds weird to put it that way, but in general, if you understand that you aren't able to play at that moment that you're deciding you want to, and you play a couple rounds or something, it's in general best not to. Though sometimes, as I said, people are different. Sometimes you have leeway to it, so you need to play a couple rounds to get into your mojo, or what have you. Wuju lives on. But after a while, it takes some understanding of yourself in general, of what you can expect out of yourself before you can start expecting out of other players. And if you can identify your own tilt, then sometimes you can identify tilt in other players, and you can understand what they're doing wrong, how it's affecting them. They kind of look at them and go, this behavior is kind of strange for their skill level. They must be on tilt. So it's a lot of Swami kind of know yourself, follow the path kind of bullshit, I know, but in general, you kind of realize through yourself what other people are going through. So then you can understand what to do about it, or make a suggestion to somebody else of what to do about it. And I don't mean like a mean suggestion like, oh, you're on tilt, stop playing newbie scrub, because that's bad. That's bad behavior. But if you have a buddy or something that you're playing with or something, and you notice he's kind of playing wonky or what have you, and if you're playing ranked, then wouldn't be a good time to play ranked. You should play normals or Dominion or something like that. Something that's not going to cause a burden, because everybody has that problem. It's not new.
Yeah. Oh, to mention the sky thing you talked about really quickly though, is he doesn't get angry at other players when he's mad. I think he's playing better because he's more focused, because he's kind of focusing his energy on one particular thing. But he's never angry at other players in the game. He's usually ranting about something outside of the game. So it's a little different.
It's not necessarily also just based around players though. Like sometimes you can be on tilt, you'd be raging at other players. Sometimes you could be on tilt and you're just raging at the game itself, or sometimes you could be raging at nobody and you're just feeling like meh. Like you don't really feel 100% in that game.
Yeah, like I'm not into what I'm doing right now.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to try as hard.
So I'd be on tilt.
Yeah.
So in general, it's like a giant psychology thing. If you understand psychology for the most part, even basic psychology, then you can kind of understand it a little bit further. And sometimes people actually try and put others on tilt in order to win. So this is why I turn all talk off, is because all people ever do and all talk is shit talk each other. That's a tactic. Like it or not, that's what people are actually trying to do, is throw you on tilt so you start doing mistakes and then you start screwing over and basically feeding the enemy team and throwing the game for your team.
Yeah. There's some preventative measures for tilting. Some is just taking a break from the game, and there's stuff you can control, like muting the chats and all that.
Yeah. Or even your own team members sometimes too, if they're being toxic or what have you, and you're feeling like you're going on tilt from it, you could just mute them instead of arguing back and forth with them, and then focus.
Yep. But yeah, you pretty much have to think about what you can do to prevent it yourself. Like, when I'm on tilt, I usually, like, I know when I'm on tilt, kind of. Usually I'll kind of passive-aggressively mention, like, oh boy, I sure like having to play this role that I don't main, or gee, I sure wish I could have some help up here, or man, I'm so glad that this guy took jungle instead of someone else. And then when I'm thinking stuff like that, I'm like, okay, well, I'm clearly on tilt right now. And sometimes for me, I can clear it before the next game. Like, I can just straight up get over it, because it's whatever. But there's other times where it's like just so bad that I would carry it with me. And it's cost me big time before. It costed me gold from dropping from gold 2 to gold 5. I went on tilt so hard I lost like 15 games in a row. Or something stupid like that. And that was just because, like, I was on tilt and I just kept going at it. I was like, no, I have all this free time. I want to keep playing. I want to keep playing. When in reality, I didn't want to keep playing. I just wanted to try and climb without actually, where I was just kind of bashing my head against it. And I paid the price. And then after that point, I just kind of went, I'll play a couple games a day, or I'll play like 3 games. Hopefully I win 2 out of 3 each day, and then I'll be done with it. Or my other way was, I'll keep playing, and as long as I keep winning, I'll keep playing. But as soon as I lose 2 games, then I'll stop. Something like that.
So there's modes of planning ahead too when it comes to that, because you're not going to always win every single game. That's just a given. Nobody can win every single game they play. They're always going to lose one or two, or even like the top player, something happens or whatever, like double lift is smurfing or something, and then something happens where he just ends up losing the game. It happens. So when you look at that, you kind of set yourself what you're going to do about it beforehand. So if you're serious about playing the game and actually want to get better, those are some ways that you can understand for yourself.
Yeah. I'll extend this thought to people who got chat restrictions, for example, for being toxic. Now, I won't blame you for having like a attitude towards players. There might have been some reason or another that made you angry enough to start spouting stuff at them. But it's being chat restricted would be a good opportunity for you guys to think about what makes you tilt and what's your limits for playing the game before you are on tilt, and then figure that out, and then play in such a way where you can always stay positive, and then you'll finally get your chat restriction lifted sooner or later, and it'll be better because you'll understand. That's why I kind of agree with the whole chat restricting thing. It's a decent measure, and it helps. I think it helps lots of people, whether or not they agree with it. Now, I myself have never been chat restricted or even warned, because most of the time when I'm getting on tilt, I'm saying stuff to myself or on Skype to my friends. I'm not saying anything in chat. I rarely ever respond in chat. Most of my communications are just pings, and occasionally some suggestions. But I don't go beyond that. I don't type in chat to say negative things because I know it's not going to help anybody. I don't know. Any thoughts towards that?
Oh, nothing I can think of. Tilting is a rather dangerous beast, especially when it comes to your career, sort of say, in League of Legends, but if you can identify it and you understand yourself well enough that you can see that you're tilting, then that's more power to you.
Yeah, so that's it for behavior this week. Our community topic is the makings of LCS teams, aka the Pay Your Coach segment. So, I actually came up with this before a big change happened in the LCS. I don't know if you know about this, Sven, but recently they have, by rules, decided that coaches are a legitimate part of the team. So now they're allowed to sit in during Champion Select to talk to their team about picks and bans and any strategies going into the games.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they have that kind of set up in like football games, for example. You always see the coaches talking back and forth between the team leader, especially when they're in their like break or whatever, and they're huddled together. The coach gives the idea, and the team leader says, "Yeah, okay, let's pull this off." Break, and then they set up their formation.
Yeah. So before that happened, I was slightly bothered by the idea that coaches weren't getting as much recognition as they should. So I'm really glad that they've decided upon this. However, there was another reason I came up with this segment. This has to do with a little controversy that happened a while back. Now, most people are aware of the player named Ocelot from SK Gaming.
Oh
He
yeah.
was a European mid laner for SK for quite a while. He ended up leaving the team to form his own with all the delicious money he has. So he decided with his team, I think his team was Gamers 2. Yeah, Gamers 2. He decided that he would get a coach, and he picked up who I think is a really great coach, who is LS. For some people who don't know, his name regularly would be Last Shadow, but he'd rather be called LS. And one thing is, LS has a certain style of coaching that seems to work for pretty much anyone. And at the most basic level, all he wants to do is get paid. So
Yeah, it's down to the principle. If you're good at anything, why sell for free? Hell, the Joker said that.
yeah. So this thing happened where he was coaching for Gamers 2 for a while, and they decided that, well, they would not keep him as a coach. He was like, he was fine with that, it was whatever to him, but he did do work up to that point, and he has a certain rate for his work, and they were not willing to pay that to him. So then became this big controversy across Twitter and Reddit and social media in general, having to do with LS pretty much getting all the chat logs together, all the coaching videos leading up to that point with them, and saying, look, I have all this stuff proving that I've done all this work, so why am I not getting paid? And he had a very specific rate, and he made it very clear that's what he wanted to get paid, and they were not willing to pay him that amount. So it didn't have a very good ending, because it came down to he got his money, but it wasn't from Gamers 2. He got it from Sky, his friend. His friend decided that, like, since LS needs to get paid to live, like every human on Earth, Sky, being the nice guy he is, decided to give him the money that was owed for them on their behalf. And that was pretty much really the end of it. I didn't really hear much after that, but it wasn't really a very satisfying ending, because they still got away with doing that. So I don't know, it just bothers me as someone who has my dad has a very professional knowledge of something, like a particular line of work that he does, and on more than one occasion he's been denied pay, like on contracts. Like people would basically take his work and then run off with the money. And so that actually caused our family to go bankrupt when I was younger. So I'm very aware of the feeling of frustration of not getting paid for hard work.
A lot of the aspect when I kind of think of that, I almost want to say he should charge a $100 upfront fee for team coaching as like danger pay or something like that, just in case something happens. Because he's demonstrated himself, obviously. Like he's good at what he does. And many teams have benefited off of his coaching. Like he's even led to the success of a couple teams too, indirectly. So he's definitely proved himself. So when you kind of look at it and you go, well, he talks to the team or whatever, he basically gives them gives them his time in analyzing, talking with the team, telling them what they're doing wrong, what they could do, all the very in detail stuff on a team level, and then he says his price. But then at the end, in this instance, they said, yeah, no, we didn't say we were going to pay you or whatever. They kept flip-flopping back and forth as to who pays who. But that is, in that instance, I almost feel like, yeah, he should, for a team, to coach for a team, he should charge like $100 or something as like an entry fee, just to prevent any loss of stuff happening. That's just my view on it.
Normally when he coaches people, he makes them pay first, so he coaches them best general public. His thing, and like, I can understand having trust in people and all that. He trusted that he would get paid this amount for doing his work, like after a certain point in time. And when that point in time came up, he didn't get paid. But he pretty much went on the idea that he could trust that it would happen. But generally he does get upfront fees on people. But that's one thing about coaching and stuff. You should, honestly, if you're going to coach people for money, you should probably consider making up some kind of contract where they have to sign it and adhere to the rules on it. So in case of something like that does happen, you have the contract to refer to.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's just as a general principle with most things. It's just like how contractors and subcontractors work on for construction and all those things. And say you get the contract, you pay a certain small amount of the upfront fee, and if you don't have all the money right away, just as long as you're adhering to the contract, it's completely fine, and just pay eventually, and there's really no problem. But I don't know, that's all very politics, and that's up for each person to figure out themselves when they're selling their services. That's really the only point I have against LS regarding this. I am on his side because of the fact that he trusted that he would get paid, and it didn't happen the way it was supposed to. But he could have done some kind of preventative measure for it. But obviously that's a whole different issue.
Yeah, and it's not to put it in a way that's discrediting him, but that's basically the naivete of this kind of setup and services to do with stuff like that. I mean, you deal with a bunch of teams in the past, that's all good, right? They were good for their money, they paid you, they did everything, what have you. But then now you get to a point where a team decides, oh yeah, we're not going to pay you. And you didn't have anything in place set up in the first place that will deal with that, of not being paid. So it's kind of like a first instance understanding of how it all works. Like, I'm not saying LS doesn't know how it all works. He's been doing it for a while. But to believe that everybody is gonna be 100% honest with you when it comes to dealings with money, that's just no. And I guess he learned, for the most part, a cold hard lesson on this one. And luckily he had proof and all that stuff to back it up. I mean, he was smart about it. He had the proof, but in the end, all the proof did was basically discredit Ocelot rather than just forcing him to pay. Whereas, as Nova said here, if he had a contract, then that would be more of a legal matter.
Yeah. But, you should pay your coach. Honestly, if they know what they're doing and they're putting all that hard, honest time into teaching you certain methods and helping your team, learn how to deal with certain situations, then you should be paying them for their service, because he's obviously helping you, and he obviously knows what he's doing. But yeah, hopefully the whole LCS recognizing coaches thing helps in that regard too. Maybe they can find out better ways to hammer out contracts with people to make sure stuff like that doesn't happen.
Yeah. Most likely Riot, as well as the LCS, have got a legal team of some sort. So if they were to be able to do dealings with that, like I think a lot of the major already set in sports setups, like the NFL, for example, going back to football or whatever. I don't watch football, but this is an example. They've got definitely legal teams and such when it comes to the dealings of money and all that stuff going back and forth. So they have people watching the contracts, watching what's going on, making sure everything is fair. At least to my knowledge, anyway. I'm not sure if that's 100% correct, but so far from what I've seen, they seem to have some sort of thing that monitors and regulates. So if they applied that to the LCS as well as Riot, seeing as Riot seems to monitor players and fines when it comes to the LCS, then yeah, it should work out better.
Yeah. That's enough of that topic. Alright, our next topic is having to do with the game itself. Our view of Season 4 now that it's ended. Since we're moving on to Season 5 now, they've implemented pretty much all the changes. They just have to hammer out the kinks now. But all the big things have come through from last time we talked about the game updates. So, Season 5's on the way. What did you think of Season 4, Sven?
I didn't mind it. I liked the changes when it was first introduced, all the support stuff. So basically Season 4, to me, it was the support season. That's what its focus was. This new upcoming season, Season 5, seems to be the jungle season. Seeing as there's a lot of changes and all the map textures and all that stuff. The minion camps have been all changed, so it's good reason to call it the jungle season. The last season, it definitely showed. Because there was a lot of emphasis on supports, so you saw a lot of the time that supports would kind of either make or break the team, which I found kind of interesting, considering how it was set up.
Yeah, because of making it the support season last season, people had to adjust to the idea that playing the support role was actually important. And up till that point, most people didn't like playing support because there was too much emphasis on doing one certain task, and that was warding for everybody. But since they had limited the wards to 3 and 1 pink, like 3 sight, 1 vision, everyone had to start doing their share of warding, which allowed the supports to focus on other matters in the game, which was controlling the lanes, changing the aspect of team fights, having more effect on the game, and they released more items having to generate gold for them. And they each had their own little quirks that would help certain sports. And then each item actually became dominant in certain champions, and they were pretty much all equally used. The relic shield, the ancient coin, and I always forget the name of the blade one. But yeah, they all fit certain champions, and they were pretty much all equally used. So they did a really good job balancing out the supports with all the new item changes, and they did a good job giving them more of a role in the game, besides just being a ward machine.
No, it definitely was useful for the for the season too. Though it seemed towards the end of the season, I found it became less about like Sona, Soraka, Leona, like kind of more in general supporty baby city champions to champions like Karma or throwing fiddlesticks in there or something like that. Just weird kind of more offensive supports. That's the only downside that I found about it. It seemed to go less away from the more supporty aspect and to something different. And I found that they actually kind of formed it towards that too, because they started removing a lot to do with the more healy and sustainy supports. Only like a few of them actually heal now, which is interesting.
Yeah. As the season progressed, people came up with champions that were working for each role, and it became kind of a mess at certain points because there was this transition from ranged mid laners, like mages, to assassins again, and then to like supporty mid laners. Like the other roles were kind of a big mess because of everything was so focused on supports. For example, I can use Lulu. She ended up going mid, and then they ended up changing certain aspects of her as a champion, and which ended up putting her in the top lane. And she kind of just hung around there for quite a while. But even though the original intention was for her was to be a support champion, but she just wasn't as effective as some of them. It kind of became this thing where the champions with good base damage on their skills became the go-to supports, whereas champions that had to scale up ended up becoming solo laners.
Yeah, so in general, last season was... It had some good points, but at the same time, it also had some really wonky, weird points that you really don't expect would have happened. But, yeah, for the most part, the seasons... For the most part, I don't really know what to say about last season. Like, it was good in some ways, but it was kind of bad in some ways, too. Some of the changes they made I found kind of I can't remember exactly what, though. That's the problem. It's like little bits and pieces here and there that they decided to change that kind of overall made this kind of chunkiness. But for the most part, I didn't mind last season. The emphasis on support kind of made support the highlight role, but no, for the most part it's not bad, and I kind of look forward to this next season because now it's emphasis on jungle, so I'm interested to see what happens now.
Yeah. One thing that kind of bothered me about last season though was, like, as much as I liked the word changes, it sometimes didn't help very much. Because the fact is, some people just don't want to ever buy wards, and that became a really bad habit for people in such a way that when I was playing support and warding, I could only ward so much. I'd get to my limit, we still wouldn't have enough vision on the map. And then what can I do about it? I can't buy more wards like I could in season 1, 2, and 3. So that was kind of it had a good point and a bad point to me. And the other thing is, because it was so focused on the lower part of the map, top lane suffered really badly between season 3 and 4. I had to stop playing top lane because it became this really wonky, just stay up here and be a tank, and just try and outpush the other guy, and never interact with the rest of the team. and that was a really boring top lane. So I didn't really like that part of the season 4. But I don't know. Honestly, I liked season 3 better than I liked season 4. Even though I really enjoyed the support changes, there was certain things that just kind of made it so I'd much rather have been playing in season 3.
Yeah. That wording, though, is definitely a huge detriment, though, on it. Because I see what they tried to do with it. They tried to get people to more actively ward, so they go, oh, I need to ward now, because there's only 3 available for the support as well as 1 pink. I guess I should start warding now, but a lot of other people took the habits from like season 3 into season 4, not really realizing exactly what they're saying with that. So they end up going, yeah, I'm not going to ward, I don't need to, I'm the AD carry, or I'm not going to ward, I don't need to, I'm top lane, or I'm the jungler, or I'm mid. So it's like,
Yeah.
General, out of this season I learned that it's, no matter what lane you're in, even if you're the AD, or even if I'm the AD carry, I still buy a pink ward, then drop it somewhere. Even if it's in our own jungle, just so we can have consistent, almost permanent vision in our jungle, it's still a benefit.
Yeah.
So that's why I like having a pink ward.
Yeah, there was no reason not to buy a pink ward at the very least last season. And this season, since it hasn't changed anything about warding.
Yeah.
And I changed my jungle style because of last season too. Back in season 2 and 3, I was very focused on just kind of farming casually and ganking and farming and ganking. Whereas in season 4, I became more focused on controlling the map with wards myself. So I ended up becoming the kind of jungler who would buy Sightstone on everything and being able to maintain some kind of vision besides just our support. So that was kind of a plus side for us, because as long as I got a role like that, I would have been able to help more. I felt like I was supporting better from jungle than I was from support sometimes.
Yeah. So there definitely are a lot of pros and cons to last season. This one I'm kind of curious as to what's going to go down. There's still a lot of things I need to work through and some kinks to iron out, but I'm curious as to where it's going to all go.
So far people have this problem with being able to clear the camps and go back. Like some people can't even clear 3 camps and go back anymore without getting killed.
Yeah.
And the reason for that is not because of the monsters. The reason for that is because of the stat change. Because I don't know if anyone realizes this, but as I talked about when we were talking about changes last time, your stats have been reduced to 87% of what they used to be at level 1. Whereas when you're level 18, they're something like 103 or 113% higher than what they were at level 18 last season. So at level 1 you start a lot weaker than you did. And that's why you have such a hard time jungling. It's not because the monsters are stronger. It's because you're weaker.
Yeah.
And I was actually thinking about that. Like, that occurred to me today when I was just kind of thinking about why people were having that problem. And then I remembered the stat changes. But I don't know, this season looks pretty good so far, besides a few things they need to fix, but as the start of any season, they always have some thing or another they need to work on before everything's in perfect order.
Yeah.
But I don't know, how did it compare to season 2 and 3 for you last season? Like, but between season 2, 3, and 4, which one do you think was the best so far?
I actually like season 2 the best.
Yeah?
I don't know what it was about Season 2. Everything just felt in place. Now it's kind of like they're all over the place, but that's just my view.
It's kind of understandable, but I don't know. I like Season 3 the best so far. As I was saying about the whole warding thing.
Yeah.
And top lane didn't feel as much of a chore back in Season 3. I could play pretty much anything up there and get away with it. But, I don't know. I'm looking forward to the new season. We'll see what happens. Hopefully, a year from now, we can talk about how Season 5 turned out. And hopefully it's mostly positive.
Yeah.
Riot's gotten bigger since Season 3. Riot's gotten a lot bigger since Season 3. So, I don't see why they can't just improve things from here on.
Oh yeah, there's a lot. There's a lot they could improve.
Yeah. That's enough of that game itself topic. Our last topic in the meta is looking ahead of the curve. So, the whole thing about the meta is, like, the meta is what it is, but there's people who can actually make it. There's people who create the meta out of playing a certain way. And most of the time it has to do with you thinking ahead about what's going to be strong based on changes in the game. And this is a good topic since the season's changed as to what can you possibly come up with that will allow you to have an edge over people for a while until they pick it up. So, looking ahead of the curve. So, anyone who listens should be thinking about what champions can they take in this coming season that are gonna change how the game is played. Like, I don't know. It's kind of a thing. Like maybe you'll be playing jungle Teemo and become a thing. Maybe it'll be something about the jungle changes that you can actually legitimately use jungle Teemo and it'll work amazingly and it'll become like the next big thing.
All in all, it looks like at the start of any season is a good time to experiment. Throw out random stuff, play normals, try and figure if it'll work. Because who knows, it might.
Yeah. So.
Especially with the stat changes too. Everything is not as it used to be.
Yeah, there's a whole ton of factors involved. So the best thing to consider is the fact that you can take a look at all the champions in the game and think about what hasn't been messed around with very much lately. Because there's been item changes, there's been stat changes involving these champions to scale them down. And you might look and you'll see a champion that hasn't been tampered with recently. And they'll be the champion that's gonna be carrying you up to diamond from wherever you might be. And that's just, like, it's completely up to you to figure that out. Like, this upcoming season, I'm going to be looking towards, like, I've been slowly revamping my champion pool in order to fit the changes. And I've been playing around with different champions to see what's strong and what works where. In fact, I've picked up Callista, and she was released with AD carry in mind, but I think I have a good way of taking her to mid lane and becoming like this kind of anti-assassin AD mid.
It's definitely got potential in the mid lane too.
Yeah.
Could be like an offset of Talon, something like that.
Yeah, like the first time I tried her mid, I was against Talon, and every time he tried hopping on me, I could just auto-attack and kite backwards, and I could like sidestep him and dodge his rakes. I could pretty much just counter play him with Callista. And it was just a thought I had in my mind based on how the champion works. And that's not really the only example. There's just like, you gotta think about how anything is going to be played. Like, there'll be champions that are going to become popular in the meta, and when you see them, you'll be like, well, this works, but I bet I could find a way to counter it with something else. And then you'll come up with some foolproof champion that can deal with all these changes. But yeah, anything to add to that?
Not really, no. Honestly, all it takes right now is just a lot of theory crafting. You take a look at the new updates and you just get a feel for what's doing what. And if you could end up figuring something out ahead of the curve, as this segment is labeled, you will end up having an advantage over players. That's very, very, very well... yeah, it'll pretty much secure your victory if you have an advantage over a player. Or the enemy team, for example. They won't be expecting, for example, Teemo jungle till you pop out of the woodwork and they're like, oh crap, this is actually really strong, what the hell? Because they wouldn't have expected it. So for the most part, yeah, just theory craft. Try new things.
Oh god, the people listening are probably going to try Teemo jungle now. Oh no. I mean, yeah, do that.
Sure, why not?
Yeah, do that so I can win.
Start a season, though. Anything can happen. Especially with these updates.
True. In the most clear, concise way of putting it, don't think about what is strong, think about what will be strong.
Yeah.
That's pretty much all it comes down to. But that's it for this week. We'll go over to the topics again. So, in mechanics was advanced movement, aka kiting and Orbwalking. And that's basically moving your champions along or against enemy movement, exploiting their speed and their range in order to beat them without taking very much damage. In behavior, it's repetition, negative repetition, the way people repeat things over and over to learn them. You can also learn bad habits, and you should try and figure out ways to break those. And the other part of behavior was tilting, which was basically how everybody can tilt and have a problem with their play simply because their head's not in the game. And the community topic was the makings of LCS teams, aka the pay your coach segment. And it was talking about the LS incident, which, I mean, if you don't fully understand what happened, you can always just look it up. There's plenty about it. And the fact that coaches are now recognized, which is really cool. And the game itself topic was our view on Season 4 now that it's over. As I said, I kind of preferred Season 3. Season 4 had some ups and downs. And our meta topic was looking ahead of the curve. And to quote the best thing once again was, don't think about what is strong, think about what will be strong. And that was that was episode 6 of the Armchair League. Thanks for listening.
Episode 6, Season 1. Thank you for listening.